Hey everyone. So I want to talk about the real alien threat. There's a lot of uncertainty as far as what aliens are, what is all this coverage that we're seeing. Undoubtedly, you've seen a lot of it. There's the whole three-eye atlas comet thing. And so I've been bombarded, and I can't imagine that I'm the only one with articles and all sorts of social media chatter. I don't know what of it is real, what it's not. It's a lot of sensational stuff about the possibility or suggesting that three-eye atlas is a alien spaceship. Now, there's one primary guy who is saying this, and that's a Harvard scientist named Avi Loeb. Okay. Then there is this movie coming out. I believe it's called The Age of Disclosure. Yeah. So that's coming out soon in November 21st. And it looks real polished, and it's a documentary, and it has a lot of federal legislators, people like Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna. I actually like Tim Burchett. I haven't decided what I think about Anna Paulina Luna, but based on what I know about them, is they're pretty decent people. Again, based on what I know about them, I know that Tim Burchett has a pretty good voting record, and I believe what he says. The many times that I've heard him, he's very skeptical of government. He thinks that we're kind of all being screwed by it and whatnot. So he's an upstanding guy based on what I've seen. But the documentary has a lot of national security guys, a lot of former CIA guys and things like that. And so really that's really suspicious. Just because you got to wonder, like, what are they up to? It's got um, John Brennan, the former CIA director, who is a really swampy individual. I mean, I wouldn't trust anything he says. He's in there. But nevertheless, you have this documentary, you have all this stuff about Three Eye Atlas, and then of course you've had a lot of mainstream reporting on the issue. There's a recent story about how this UFO reporting app called Enigma has has um, has thousands of reports about USOs, unidentified submersible objects. And this thing was launched like in 2022, and they said they got like thousands of reports. So all this is coalescing. It's culminating in what appears to be some sort of um, narrative bombardment. There is clearly the spigot has been open, and someone at some point gave the permission or the go ahead to essentially talk about this all the time. So the first suspicion that people I think have, or the most common suspicion, is that, well, what's going on here is that the world is being prepared for a reveal, a big reveal or whatnot. After decades of them hiding, them being the government and the defense contractors and whoever else, hiding this truth, and after decades of whistleblowers coming out, and I think, I personally know someone who says they've seen aliens. They're in the military, and I don't want to give them away, but uh, he believes he saw that out in New Mexico and whatnot during a project that he was working on. And I think there's a lot of people who have seen something. Some have seen UFOs. I remember when I was doing local reporting in Montana, there was a lady who came. I have her book somewhere, and she did a book on UFOs in Montana. Montana has quite a few military bases, including Maelstrom out there where we were. And I got a lot of stories, all off record, from very respectable people who saw strange things. I remember one particular story, this lady who owns, restaurants and I think even hotels or whatever in town or something like that, or uh, I don't know but she's pretty respectable. She told me that they were driving from Great Falls one day in, I don't know, the '70s or '80s, and they were followed by this, like, weird orb, like, a great distance, and she always remembered that for obvious reasons. And so maybe what's happening, a lot of people may reason is that it's hard to keep this under wrap anymore. The cat's out of the bag, the aliens out of the spaceship, and it's just time to come clean. And maybe it's a possibility. There's a lot of compelling stuff out there. I know that a lot of people are still in that camp where they're like, "There's nothing there's no proof, we woulda known by now, whatever." And I think a lot of those people who think like that, they're assuming that when you talk about this stuff, you're talking about aliens from outer space. I don't think that's if what it is if they're here, whatever they are, I don't think they're coming from outer space. I agree with David Grush, a whistleblower, who said that he had heard or somehow he got information that these are interdimensional beings. And I think that aligns with a lot of other narratives. It also aligns with my biblical view. So I don't necessarily want to get into all the theories and all the ideas. I have a friend and we go back and forth and we talk about this stuff. And uh, we're probably also me, my family, we're probably like a lot of people. We watch various UFO related stuff, including the Y files, which is pretty popular, pretty done well, and whatever. But I think this is one of those things that everyone is really interested in because it's just a great big question. So the thing I wanna focus on is that it appears that there's some sort of movement among the powers that be, among the controllers of the narrative, among the people who hold the secrets, and I think it it's signaling that something is changing. That they're working on something, and I'm not gonna pretend to know what that is. I'm not gonna pretend to know if it's good or bad, but my suspicion is, given their track record, the powers that be, they don't really do a lot of things, for benevolent reasons. They just don't. And so based on their track record and based what I sense are some of the narratives that are already building, I want to issue 2 things, 2 warnings that we need to be aware of. Now, the first thing I want to, um, I want to warn about is that the way that the narrative is being built, or maybe it's even naturally that way, is that these things, these for instance, the TikTok video, remember that broke a few years ago, the New York Times broke it, remember, all of a sudden, and that kinda opened wide, the floodgates of UFO reporting. After that, we started seeing stuff all over the place. Anyway, so we see this video, and, it was released by the military, or somehow they got it from the military, and this thing's just going crazy, right? Everyone's probably seen it, it's flying around, the pilots can't keep up with it, they can't, zero in on it, and they're like, "Whoa, look at this thing go!" But there's also been a lot of stories that have built up even over time that when, for instance, UFOs appear near nuclear bases or military bases with nuclear weapons, they'll like shut them down all of a sudden, like they'll shut them down. There was a video that was shown during a congressional hearing, which I think Anna Polina Luna was chairing, where someone said or showed a video of a missile. They launched a missile at this thing and it just kind of like bounced off. So the obvious takeaway here is that these things are very dangerous. I mean, maybe not. Let me take that back. Not necessarily very dangerous. These things are very advanced, and the uh, the other takeaway is that by being so advanced is they could very well do whatever the heck they want. So the larger picture is that they could very well be a threat. And so that's not necessarily a narrative that they really have to work hard, I think, to create, because humans have a tendency to be afraid of that which we don't know. And so that's obviously going to be the case too when it comes to beings that we don't, we're not familiar with or whatnot. But watch out for the fact that this thing, they're going to use this thing to justify, just like in in Independence Day, when you have a threat, if you manage to tell or sell the narrative, whether it's real or fake, that we have a threat of an alien invasion or whatever, the response that they're going to want, one of the things that they're going to pitch is going to be global cooperation. And again, if it's legitimate, that makes sense, obviously. But I'm not sold at all that whatever they're gonna tell us is going to be the truth. I mean, unless the aliens come out, front front and center and whatever it's like, and that's highly unlikely to happen. I just don't see that happening. I think it's I just don't think it's gonna be that clear. And so what I think we need to be on the lookout for is going to be the way that they roll out the news, and it's gonna be followed by the suggestion or the pitch or the straight up just mobilization to where the governments, say, "This is so crazy, this is such an emergency, this is such a threat that we essentially need global cooperation." And from that, they're going to springboard into the fact that in order to get global cooperation to fight this threat, you're going to need a global government. Now, the reason I say that is because they have used every threat, whether fake or real, to pitch global government. After World War One, they created the League of Nations, and it was supposed to be the beginning of a world government. And the idea of the League of Nations was that if you have this big member, just a coalition of all the countries, then you're not going to have a world war. Now, of course, like 20 years later, or less than 20 years later, that obviously failed. You had World War II, so that didn't work. But then you had then they created the United Nations, and that's still around. And so 80 years later, now we have the European countries really, um, really fighting back or trying to or complaining about all the power that United Nations has on their sovereignty and on their policies, crazy climate change stuff, censorship, digital censorship and whatnot, open borders, all those things are happening at the behest of the UN. That's the reason Brexit happened, because the UK, the people of the UK were like, we can't have this other entity controlling our policies. But they're still controlling the policies of the member states, and they have openly admitted. There was a interview with a UN official done by James O'Keefe, where essentially they said that it's a world government. That's the point. So they have had it. They have had as an agenda for a very long time a world government, and I can't imagine anything better to scare people into finally acquiescing into one, uh, through a um, by convincing them that there is a threat that comes from otherworldly or more intelligent and advanced beings. I think that would do it. I think people would be like, okay, we don't know what this thing is. They're going to be scared. When people are scared, they're likely to basically do whatever it takes to to be comforted or to seek some sort of refuge. And so I think I can't imagine that if something does come out, whatever it is, that they're not going to pitch that, that they're not going to say, okay, there's only one way to deal with this. And either way, I think it's a terrible idea, even if they pitch it for a temporary whatever. It would never be temporary and whatnot. So there's one other threat that I have in mind, and I'm sure there's others that I think would surface in this scenario. And this has precedent as well. There has always been, for at least for as long as I've been paying attention, the idea that it's possible that these things are um, engineered humans, essentially that they are the ones who made us, that they seeded us. And this is actually a prevalent idea in some of the most popular uh, alien style or alien related media and books and whatnot. You have Chariots of the Gods. That's certainly suggested in there. You have Ridley Scott's movie Prometheus, which is actually very good, for what it is. And then there was this book I got a long, long time ago by Jim Marrs, and he shows up in a lot of the Ancient Aliens commentary and whatnot. He wrote a book called Rule by Secrecy. I thought I had it somewhere here. Man, every time I need a book, I can't find it, and I thought they were everywhere. And so the Jim Mars, he has a lot of legitimate stuff in there. He talks about the Trilateral Commission and the Rockefellers' role in establishing and trying to establish a world order and things like that. So there's a lot of really credible stuff that has been corroborated and whatnot. But then he gets to the end there, and where he talks about ultimately he tries to winnow it down as like, what are we talking about here? And so he ends up subscribing to Zachariah Stitchin's what's called the ancient astronauts theory, and which essentially says that these beings called the Anunnaki, they're seafaring aliens. They came here for I forgot what the exact reason was. I don't know if it's to mine gold or copper or whatever. And they ended up making they needed slaves, and so they made human beings. And so that's those are just of the various a few of the theories that play along and aligned with this idea that aliens all are true makers. And this aligns with decades, a century at least, of the globalists, the international attack on the origin story of Western civilization, uh, which is Christendom, which comes down to God, the God of the Bible, Yahweh, and He created the world through Jesus Christ. And so this flies in the face of that. And so the reason I'm saying that this is something we need to be wary of is not just because we already have precedent of the narrative and the idea that that some people think that aliens are creators, but we also have a long track record of the powers that be have trying to attack and to dismantle Christianity. We are living through that. We're barely holding on to the remnants of Christendom as it is. And so when you have if you have some sort of reveal, however much of it will be real, how much of fake, whatever, you can bet there is going to be a major, major effort to position these things as our masters or makers or whatever. I don't know how legitimate it would be, but I guarantee you that's going to be part of it. And it's going to cause a great falling away and whatnot. But all that is consistent with, I get again, like I said, with the various narratives that already been around that these are possibly our makers and the century long, at least century long attack on our Christian heritage. So I wanted to put that out there. I know it's kind of weird. I guess it's considered weird, but I think it's stupid that we don't talk about this in the mainstream, considering everyone is into it. This is something that everyone pays attention. I really don't know anyone who doesn't pay attention to the stuff or has an opinion. And so I think we need to address and talk about it in at least ways that we can be sure, in at least ways that are practical to us as possible. Like I said, I'm not going to dive into all the theories of what they are, but I wanted to really put it out there because they the powers that be have a very bad track record. And I just can't imagine that this thing, whatever they're working toward, would not be exploited. So thanks for watching. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do so. And if you like what I do, tell others about it. And I think there's even an option somewhere where you can pay to subscribe or get a paid subscription. That would be greatly appreciated. But thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.